Hi everyone. So tonight I thought I would cover a topic that I think is probably at the forefront of many of our minds at the moment, given the very strange situation we find ourselves in all across the world with the coronavirus crisis. And that is how we cope in the midst of these very uncertain times and in the midst of this kind of unexpectedly imposed isolation that we find ourselves in, whether we're actually self-isolating because we're ill or we're living with people who are ill, or simply because we are observing the social distancing rules that are keeping us all safer than we would be if we weren't observing them. One of the things that I was reading today, and I'm sure many of you will have seen reports like this in the newspapers and on the internet, is that doctors and the medical profession generally and psychologists are increasingly concerned about the mental health effects of the whole situation, the kind of not just the impact that some people will feel because they have been physically affected by the virus, or maybe they are noticing a loved one who's been physically affected by the virus, or perhaps they're even somebody who has lost a loved one due to the virus itself, or due to the pressure that's been put on the health system, which has made it harder to care for people who haven't got the virus. It's likely that all of us in some way will be or are being profoundly affected by what's going on, and obviously some people will be more affected by others, but even people who are fairly resilient and who are fairly secure, if you like, in their home circumstances, maybe they are in a situation where they're living with people, so they've got company and so on, maybe they haven't had terrible difficulties accessing shopping the way that some people have, etc., etc., are still reporting that they feel strange and that they find this challenging. And certainly people I'm in touch with, I know friends of mine and acquaintances of mine who are very kind of together kind of people and who feel or felt very prepared for this, have said how surprised they have been about the impact that the situation has had on them and on their mental health, and how they have felt. They've experienced feelings of anxiety and they've experienced feelings of depression and so on. And I count myself in that number. I generally have been okay. I've been very busy during this time because of my job. Part of my job at the moment is actually responding to the situation by helping coordinate the voluntary sector's efforts in my city in responding to the coronavirus crisis. So I've been extremely busy, and that's been good in a way because it's kept me focused on doing things and not too introspective, which I might be otherwise. But I've had my moments where I've found myself feeling constrained and constricted and anxious. One of the things that I am very aware of is my parents are up in Scotland. My dad is currently being treated for prostate cancer. He was diagnosed almost exactly a year ago, just over a year ago. And it's been a challenging year in many ways for him. And obviously my mind has been up there, and I've been up there, up and down to Scotland several times in the past year in order to be with him at critical points and with my mum. And at the moment, of course, I can't be up there with them, and that's difficult, and I'm having to deal with that in whichever way I can. And that's what made me think about doing this video, really, because I wanted to do a video where I shared with you some of the practices that I have found particularly helpful in enabling me to feel as calm and as centered as I possibly can during this time. And I'm entitling this video Top Mindful / Spiritual Practices. And the reason I've called it that is that some people would see these practices as spiritual, but you don't need to have any kind of spiritual spirituality or faith in order to be able to practice them. It's entirely possible to practice them without that. Even the one that's the most spiritual sounding of the lot, if you like, and that's prayer, which I'm going to come to in a second. All of them can be done with a mindful mindset rather than a spiritual mindset. So you call them what you want to call them, you relate to them in the way that works for you. But here are the practices that I think would be most helpful, or can be most helpful to you. They've certainly been very helpful to me. So starting with number one, and it's the most obvious and simple one of all, and that is mindfulness itself. So when we mean mindfulness, I'm talking here about being present in this moment. So it's very easy, of course, in a situation like this to project off into the future, to start wondering about what's going to happen, maybe even imagining what's going to happen, and if we're really kind of putting ourselves in a difficult position, we'll be catastrophizing what's going to happen and thinking the worst of what's going to happen. So, if you want to experience worry, then project yourself into the future, and then you'll find yourself worrying about what's going to happen. The other thing that can happen at a time like this is we can head off into the past, and we can start thinking about the things that we should have been doing or that we could have been doing. And we might be thinking, we should have started isolating sooner, or maybe we should have been more careful and ordered face masks while there were still plenty available, and so on. So we start thinking about things we could have done and didn't do and beating ourselves up about it. And none of those things, whether you're living in the future or in the past, is conducive to feeling centered and calm. So mindfulness is about coming to the present moment, just being aware of where you are here and now. And generally, for most of us, the truth of the matter is here and now and this moment is actually okay. And I'm talking here obviously to people who are watching this video, and if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you are not in the kind of most critical condition in terms of dealing with an illness. You are possibly very worried about that kind of thing, either for yourself or for others, but you're in a position where you can watch this video and you can take in these words. Now, if that's the case, you're almost in a position, also in a position where you can be mindful of this moment. You can take this moment in, you can take a deep breath, you can bring yourself back to this moment. You can notice when you're going into the past and considering something that either you did or didn't do, that you should have done or shouldn't have done, or heading off into the future and worrying about what's coming. And one of the most powerful mindfulness practices that there is simply to notice that. Notice when you're in the past or when you're in the future. And when you notice, just bring yourself back to this moment and notice what is in this moment. Notice the chair that you're sitting in. Notice that it's supporting you. Notice that there's a floor under the chair supporting the chair. Notice that there's air in the room that you can breathe. Notice that there's light to see with. Notice that your arms are moving and functioning, and maybe you've just eaten something and so you're feeling satisfied, or maybe you're feeling hungry. Notice you have sensations in your body that tell you how you feel. Notice that notice the temperature that you are. You might be warm, you might be cool. Be present. Just come to how you feel now, without being in the past or in the future. How you feel now, and just bring yourself back, bring yourself back, bring yourself back. Mindfulness. That's the in the moment mindfulness practice that you can do. Notice when you're out of this moment, bring yourself back to it. A longer term practice, of course, is a sitting meditation practice where you can sit and meditate, allow thoughts to come and go, and just keep coming back to the stillness of your meditation, following your breath if that's how you're doing the meditation, or maybe you're meditating and using a mantra to concentrate, a repeated phrase or a chant, so you can come back to that. But any kind of meditation practice or mindfulness practice that brings you back to this moment will help you to feel calmer and more peaceful and more centered. So that's number one, mindfulness. Number 2 is, some people would call it grounding, some people would call it earthing. So this is where you literally plant yourself on the earth and are connected with the physicality of the earth. Now, some people would call this earthing and go outside and walk around barefoot. Maybe they go and stand on the grass. If you're lucky enough to have a garden of your own, you can do that. If you are in a country where the social distancing and lockdown regulations allow you to go out for a daily walk, which is what we can do here in the UK, then you can do that if you like during your daily walk, just so that you can feel more connected with the physicality of the earth. It's a very powerful, very, very restorative practice, just going and standing on your lawn barefoot and taking a few deep breaths. There are other ways of doing it, of course, if you don't want to do that. You can do the very hippy-dippy thing that people laugh at and hug a tree, or just lean against a tree, but just go and spend a moment or two in nature, leaning against a tree, breathing deeply, allowing the shade of the tree to comfort and calm and cool you, and just spend a moment outside in nature with something solid like that. You could also go and gather flowers and bring them back to your house, and then that would be a reminder of the groundedness and earthing that you had done. So that's practice number 2, grounding and earthing. And then practice number 3, in a sense, connects the 2 practices that I've just talked about. So the more kind of, if you like, head-focused mindfulness practice, where you're kind of up here, and then the grounded earthing practice, where you're walking barefoot, or at least connecting with the earth in a way. And this mindfulness practice, I call it a heaven and earth meditation, very simple. It just involves sitting down, doesn't have to be outside, you just sit down somewhere comfortably, plant your feet on the floor or on the ground, spine nice and straight, sit up straight and comfortably in your chair. You can close your eyes if you like, and then take a deep breath. And as you take that first deep breath, you imagine that the energy of the earth is lifting up through the soles of your feet, up through your calves and your thighs, up through your legs, up to your heart. And you imagine it allowing your heart to expand. And then as you breathe out, you allow that light, that energy, that earth energy, if you like, to breathe out into the world and the space around you. And then the second breath, all it takes is 3 breaths. You can do more than that, but 3 is the minimum. The second breath, you kind of do the opposite. You imagine that the energy of the sun or the sky or heaven, or however you want to see it, is coming in through the crown of your head as you breathe in. It's coming in, it's down all the way through your head and to your heart. And again, as you breathe out, it expands in your heart and then expands out into the world around you and the space around you. And in the third breath, you imagine that those 2 things are happening simultaneously. The energy of the earth is coming up to your heart, the energy of the sky or the sun or of heaven is coming down into your heart. And then once you've done that in-breath, you allow it to expand. And then in the out-breath, the energy goes out into the space around you, into the outside world, into your aura, however you want to visualize it. And once you've done that, you're done. If you want to go on breathing like that and imagining the 2 streams of energy coming in and going out, coming in and going out, coming in and going out, you can go on doing that for as long as you like, until you feel calm, peaceful and connected. So that's the third one. The fourth one is to read inspiring literature every day. And obviously in a spiritual practice, many people read spiritual texts. They read the Bible or the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita or the Tao Te Ching. Some people read more modern spiritual texts like the Course in Miracles. There are many things out there that you can read. I enjoy reading. At the moment, I'm actually occasionally dipping into A Course in Miracles. I also enjoy reading a book called Opening Doors Within, which is a kind of a daily devotional that was written by Eileen Caddy, who is one of the founders of the Findhorn Foundation, and she wrote it as a kind of, a bit like A Course in Miracles, as a channeled text, where she received this voice, if you like, and she transcribed it, and it's written again like A Course in Miracles, as though it's the voice of God, but it's not written in any kind of denominational way. So it's very light reading, if you like, very simple, profound messages, or simple but profound messages. So that's one of the things that I enjoy. The Tao Te Ching is something else I also really love to read. The I Ching is also useful to read. It's more of a divinatory tool than a text that you would read from cover to cover, but the I Ching is also worth exploring. So there's all kinds of different texts, inspiring texts that have a spiritual dimension, but of course it doesn't have to have a spiritual dimension. You can read poetry that you enjoy, you can read comics that you enjoy. One of my favourite comics, and one that I often will tap into if I want to tap into some wisdom, is the Calvin and Hobbes strip by Bill Watterson. I absolutely adore Calvin and Hobbes, and I think it's a strip that shares some pretty profound wisdom. So any kind of inspiring literature that lifts you up and that allows you to be more of a light, especially when times are dark, is a very good mindful spiritual practice. And again, the very best kind of inspiring literature is the kind that brings you back to yourself and back to this moment and back to presence. So that's my fourth recommendation. Then my fifth recommendation, and this is the one that you'll think, well, how can this be anything other than spiritual, is to pray. Now, obviously prayer is something that people tend to associate with religion, particularly with Christian religion, but really prayer is simply a way of stating one's intent to a higher power, higher reality, deeper, larger, more meaningful entity, if you like. And it doesn't have to be a separate entity from yourself. So obviously in some religions the idea of God is very much a separate being from the created, his creations, but that's not true in every religion. So in Buddhism, in Taoism, in many of the religions of the East, if you like, there is not a separation between creator and created. It is all one thing. And in many, of course, esoteric traditions, Western esoteric traditions, like Kabbalah, ceremonial magic, various other more modern approaches like theosophy, the Alice Bailey teachings and so on, the sense is actually of something much more connected to who and what we are. So prayer can be a petitioning, if you like, or a request made to that higher power, however you conceive it to be. So if you're going to use prayer as a way of connecting mindfully and spiritually, simply know that you're praying to the God of your understanding. And one of the things that I like to do in terms of praying, because I'm not particularly religious, is to remind myself that when I pray, really, I'm praying so that I can hear what my prayer is. So when I'm saying, God, can I have this, or can you help me be this, or how do I cope with this situation, or please give me some guidance, really, I can be saying the same things to myself. And I don't mean that I don't mean that to be in any way self-aggrandizing. I'm not at all suggesting that, you know, I am the equivalent of God, this kind of great all-powerful being at all. I'm simply acknowledging that I am part of all that is, and I'm the one that's responsible for my life in this moment. And so if I'm asking for something of God, the very least I can do is listen to what I'm asking for and to see if I can give that thing to myself, or if I can help myself. So if I'm saying, God help me, I try to hear that as Brian, help yourself. And that then takes me into a position of thinking, well, what do I need to do in order to help myself? What can I do in this situation if it's troubling me or is difficult for me? What can I do? What can I do from here, from now, to help myself out? And that way prayer becomes something very self-empowering rather than something that involves putting the onus on someone or something else to get things done. I can't remember exactly, but there's a quote from the English raconteur and eccentric Quentin Crisp, where he says something like, I can't bring myself to believe in a being who in one moment is making the planet spin through space and keeping the stars fixed in the firmament, and then suddenly stops everything in order to give me a bicycle with 3 gears. So so that kind of puts a pin in the idea of this law of attraction idea, that if you simply ask God for something, you'll get it, and if you ask properly, you'll get it, and if you don't get the thing you're asking for, you're not doing it right. It kind of pokes fun at that and puts a pin in that, and I like that, because for me, prayer isn't about getting something, it's about giving something. And when I pray for something, I try to pray for an understanding and knowledge of how I can be of greater service, and because of that, it's really important to me to think about and listen to what it is I'm praying for, because then I can take action based on what I'm hearing myself ask. So, and then my final practice, so those were my first 5 practices. My final one, the 6th practice, is another form of meditation, and it's Metta meditation, the loving kindness meditation. And I want to just read to you how one would do this, because this is a practice that is very powerful, I think, and it's probably very appropriate given where we are at the moment, because obviously many people in the world at any time, but it's really brought home to us at this particular time, are in need of help. And even though we're physically distant from people, it doesn't mean, and we call it social distancing, in reality it doesn't mean it has to be social distancing. We can still reach out to people virtually and metaphorically to help them. We can still check in on our neighbours by phoning them, and our friends by checking in on them. There are many things we can do even though we might be feeling isolated. And the Metta meditation is a good way of reminding ourselves of how we can be kinder to ourselves and to the world at large. And it's both simple and also in a way challenging, and you'll see why when I read to you what you do. So the first thing to do, of course, is to get into a meditative state, however that works for you, taking a few deep breaths, doing what I suggested earlier with the mindful meditation, bringing yourself to the present, maybe doing the heaven and earth meditation, but becoming centered, becoming calm, getting into your meditative, mindful state. And then you might like to imagine yourself surrounded by a protective circle or sphere of light, and because you're going to be giving something out, and you will want to think about how that is going out into the wider world, and perhaps that egg of light, that sphere of light, can be a useful protective sphere for you while you're doing that. And then what you're doing is you are repeating a series of loving kindness blessings. And the first set of blessings is for yourself. So you could recite these blessings out loud, or you could say them internally, but this is how they go. May I be at peace. May my heart remain open. May I awaken to the light of my own true nature. May I be healed. May I be a source of healing for all beings. Then you bring to mind a loved one, somebody you care about, and you see them in your mind's eye in as much detail as possible, and you imagine that that loving light is enveloping them, and just imagine it growing brighter and merging with the light that is surrounding you, and bless them. And you would say, either imagine yourself talking directly to them, or you would say their name. So if you were talking directly to them, you would say, may you be at peace, may your heart remain open, may you awaken to the light of your own true nature, may you be healed, may you be a source of healing for all beings. And you can repeat that for as many people as you wish, which is a wonderful way, especially now, if you're feeling separated from people, it's a wonderful way of connecting with them on a different plane. And then the challenging bit comes, because then you think about somebody who you hold in judgment, and maybe somebody you haven't forgiven completely yet. And you place them in the sphere of light, and you imagine it connecting with you, and you imagine that that light is washing both them and you clean, and you say again, either directly to them or using their name, may you be at peace, may your heart remain open, may you awaken to the light of your own true nature, may you be healed, may you be a source of healing for all beings. And then you might want to do the same thing. You can imagine the planet, and you could say, may the planet be at peace, may the planet remain open, may the planet awaken to the light of its own true nature, may the planet be healed, may the planet be a source of healing for all beings. And you might want to repeat that for the human race, or the animal kingdom, or you might want to put all beings on all of it. So may all beings be at peace, may all beings' hearts remain open, may all beings awaken to the light of their own true nature, may all beings be healed, may all beings be a source of healing for all beings. And you go on as long as you want, as many times as you want, and you're blessing yourself and others, and that is a loving kindness meditation. Of course, the best kind of loving kindness is the loving kindness of action. So what you might want to think about after you have done that meditation is what some of the things are you can do on a practical level to show loving kindness to yourself and to others. You might want to make a list of ideas, and then go ahead and start working through that list. So those are my top 6 spiritual / mindful practices that I'm finding extremely helpful at keeping me centered and grounded and peaceful during this challenging time for us all. So I offer them to you with love, and I'll be back soon with some more thoughts and ideas, which I hope you'll find helpful. See you soon. Take care. Be well.